Tortucanwoodpress.com. Yeah.
Take it away, RJ.
Yeah. Hello, another evolution hour. It's hot as Hades here in Spokane. We're kicking up into the 90s, although it's not as bad as 90s would be in places that have high humidity. So, yeah. But I want to make sure that my lawn doesn't incinerate. I've been asked to have a shout out to Aaliyah, who is Sean's friend. First day at a new high school. Times have been a little bit tough and uncertain, but hang in there. And this is actually more uncertain times than usual for just about everybody. There was just a report here in Spokane of a young couple that were about to get married, and they both came down with COVID, and the young bride died just out of the blue, only 25 years old. It was, and that reminds us, let's start off with a bummer, but it reminds us that even though the demographics are such that old farts like me are more susceptible theoretically to COVID, that doesn't mean you're off the hook. That there could be, although she didn't even seem to have any indications of pre-existing condition problems and stuff. So that's a one where everybody mask up, be careful, independent of what idiot governors or idiot presidents might be telling you, follow the rules that are really going to help. And remember, you don't want to spread it to other people because you get infection vectors going on and things can get out of control to where you run out. A lot of rural areas in some of the states in the South are ones that have relatively low infections, but they don't need a lot to run out of hospital beds. So everything can just go right out of control here. We're trying to hold the line. Idaho is apparently starting to spike up their conservative land over in the next county that just about 40 miles from where I am in Spokane, and there is a different state. They've got a whole hotbed of, oh, masks are infringing on my rights stuff. And I'm going, I don't wish you ill, but a lot of you aren't going to be around to vote this November if you keep this up. Yikes. So anyway, that's the thing. Everybody stay safe. This could not be more important. Educators like Mel have to deal with this in terms of that. School openings. My niece, who runs a Montessori school, is not at all sure that she's going to be maybe retiring because of the lack of being able to do the classes this year. So everybody is just uncertain. So Ilea, you're not alone. We're all kind of in that fix. So on to the show. Theoretically, Jackson will be showing up. Maybe he got delayed on some point or another, or it could be even bad. Oh, there it's Jackson. Speak of the not devil, you just showed up. And Tornado, yep. you can keep an eye on the live chat if you got the.
Sorry, I ended up getting caught up in doing some doodles, so that's
well, yeah, doodles will do it. You know, if you're doodling that way, diddly doddle. I was kind of on a completely irrelevant note. I had a chance to see the screening of Hamilton, which I have been very curious to see, and it is exactly as good as everybody says. It's just stunning and very
Hamilton.
Very emotional and effective and clever, and I can see why everybody's blown away by it. And if you're not emotionally ripped by it at the end of it, well, good gravy, you're made of granite. I can figure that out. So how are we were just talking about doom and gloom and COVID-19 and a whole bunch of other funky stuff just before you arrived. How's things in Louisiana, Jackson?
Hot and humid as always.
Yeah, it's hot and not humid here. We're pushing into the 90s here, which means I got to put more water on the grass and that to keep it from going and all that kind of stuff. We tend to wait until it's later.
We just think about rain and it happens.
Out of curiosity, when does the sun go down way down there in Louisiana?
After 8.
Well, in here it's about just before 9:30.
Oh, well.
So daylight stretches way out.
Yeah, when I was in Michigan, that was bizarre because the sun went down at like 10 or something like that. And so, and it was only 2 hours later. And I was like, what time is it? It's midnight. How is it midnight? The sun just went down.
Yeah. You get used to it up in northern latitudes like this, where we enjoy it. It gives you all that extra time to play around with stuff. But when we would travel down into the South, we go, yipes, it's short days down here. The sun goes down awfully early, doesn't it?
Yeah, it goes down like really quickly during what is it, winter? Yeah.
And then we get the exact opposite then in the winter when, if you don't like dark skies, well, don't live here. Anyway, that's the completely irrelevant side issues kind of programming here. We'll get to the main acts shortly. But I thought I would call attention. We're constantly doing research, picking up material that's going to go into the Second Rocks book. And one of them that occurred in your debate with Anderson just yesterday or so happened to be when Anderson tossed the latest material on the Lenski citrate experiment.
Which he misrepresented in real time.
Yeah. And Michael Behe, turns out he's been riffing off of it as well. So all of that stuff, I was just downloading the Blunt paper and the stuff. There was a Lenski 2017 review of all that.
Young Earth creationists misrepresenting sources.
Yeah, I know. It's shocking, isn't it?
He claimed that they had reached the point with the CIT plus lineage where they were finally dying off. Genetic entropy is happening. No, that's not at all what the paper was saying. The paper was saying they moved them from an environment where they moved them from a partial glucose environment to a total glucose environment, and they were not doing so well because you took them out of the environment that they were adapted to and just dropping them in a new environment and expecting them
Which, of
to
course,
just do
what
okay.
it is remember what the whole Lenski experiments, it had been going on for decades. They're up to like, 80,000 generations or some such thing in the various lineages, and they've taken subsections. Because what they've done, they took the stripped down, no options, basic cable version of E. coli that lacks all plastids, which are the little modules that are some of the drivers of really interesting adaptive evolution, precisely to measure just what goes on in the basic organism. How much variation can you have? How much adaptation can you have? How resilient are they? And so they've been experimenting with that just to see, there's, I think, very few instances of where they were intentionally causing mutations, except in some lines where they would be experimentally recreating certain mutations in the lineage, because basically, since they've got this initial set of populations that are genetically identical or have modified over time, they can basically go back and repeat the experiment with variations. So they can see, well, what happens if this mutation took place at that point? And so it's not a creationist. Anderson, I guess, was thinking that if the E. coli didn't sprout legs and turn into a butterfly right in front of you, that it was a failure. But
which we definitely expect. Well, because his argument was, which is interesting, because for the de novo genes thing, his argument was that all these de novo genes are already present. They're just somehow getting distributed with the heterozygosity. But here's an instance where we have a new feature we know what it looked like before when it didn't have this feature, and now we know what it looks like after these mutation events, and that's not evidence for evolution because it's changing what was already there. And then I tried giving him the example of the feather evolution, which is a duplication of the genes involved in regulating scale development.
Yeah, and he was way behind the curve on that little puppy.
He basically just said no. That was his response to that. So
literally,
pretty much, he said he's like, oh, you're just assuming that they're homologous, and I was like, no. And then we
in shameless plug mode, we discussed the orphan gene matter and feather evolution and sundry such subjects. It's a little tiny little book that you can get, and volume 2 I'm sure will be the of equivalent mass, because we're continuing to get new material on that, including our victim of the moment, our dear pal Jeanson, and his Replacing Darwin book that we're going through bit by bit, source by source, because as it happens, there was a beautiful new posting by Joel Duff on Answers from Jeanson, revealing the truth of Joseph's global famine. That apparently Duff had written an April Fool's post back in 2017, where he offered as an idiotic notion, if you're going to be a literalist, they refer to the famine of Joseph's time in Egypt as being covering all the nations, and the same terminology that you get with the global flood. So he said, if you're being consistent, you should treat it as a global famine. And he was just treating it as literally an April Fool's joke because it was posted on April 1st. Well, now along comes Jeanson, particularly on this video series from Answers in Genesis, where he's arguing that it was a global famine.
Well, RJ, they say life imitates art.
Yep.
But there was what was it? We were reading an article. I don't remember who it was by, but this article pointed out that creationists have for years lampooned evolution as saying that one species gives birth to a new species, when they're now taking the opposite approach and basically demanding that one species gives birth to another species.
They're
at blinding speed.
I noticed that, so basically creationists start out by lampooning it by saying, oh, that's evolution is just one species turning into another.
They're like, it's so dumb. Huh. Who would believe that? Apparently us in a few years.
Well, remember, Jeanson is the one, so far he's a minority, but he's the one who insisted with a straight face that creationists have always accepted transitional forms.
Yeah.
And never mind that, but then they say, now show, and basically they say, show me this turning into that, otherwise evolution is fake and you have a religion.
Anyway, I'll give Jackson a wonderful nod for how well you did against Anderson, who is, after all, a serious PhD. And even he had to compliment that you did better in the debate with him than an awful lot of people that he has apparently run up against. I
enjoyed it. If Standing watches this, I don't know if he does, he might, but then, hat tip, thanks. It was an interesting debate. He was now the third person from Answers in Genesis I've spoken to, so I had a good time. For a debate about universal common ancestry, very little of our debate was about universal common ancestry.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't know about any paleontology, and apparently has the curiosity of a block of wood on it.
No, that was kind of intriguing because he basically harumphed all fossils.
Yeah.
He just kind of said, well, it doesn't matter. They can be interpreted different ways. Excuse me. And then because I tried giving him the
and
horse
he's willing
and
to accept dogs and wolves as a Barrowman, but he's leery about foxes. But when pinned down as to on what basis, suddenly you see him skedaddling out the exit.
Well, I'll say for the sake of argument, that was was kind of intriguing because it was. Yes, I agree. The genetics says so, and then as soon as you go with something else, he's like, "Well, I'm not an expert in the genetics of that."
Yeah, which is simultaneously honest but also evasive, because if you're trying to apply this genetic argument, and basically when you asked him about what kind of evidence would he accept for evolution, it was literally only a genetic issue. So that's basically flushing all that other stuff down the drain. Well, meanwhile, I got my therapsids, thank you, and you're not getting anywhere close to him. So there we go. Anyway,
in the meantime, one thing I'd love to do is to talk to someone about just how sheerly impossible, the sheer impossibility of the flood.
Oh, well, yeah, that one is another matter. But even if the flood were physically possible, it still doesn't get them off the hook for the paleontology and the genetics. That independent of whether or not there was a global cataclysm, they're still pegged to a time frame that is ridiculously too fast for the differentiation of life from creation to the flood time, and then post-flood with the second bottleneck down to the extant organisms. They're in just a terrible mess. So that's just a frosting on another cake that's burst into flames.
I mean, never mind the fact that all those all those swings would put the planet into climate chaos just in its entirety. You're basically looking at the extinction of everything during a global.
Oh yeah, there's never any way they're going to be dealing with. And so what Jeanson has done now with the global famine is dump yet another layer of citation effing needed under the belt on this. So I'm going to be looking. They've now got something on the order of like 25 videos in this series. Just a short while ago, when I first heard about this thing, they'd only had like 16. So they've added quite a few since that. And whether or not they're into the Q&A section of the bit, so maybe they've actually kind of finished the series. And they're quite long videos. They're like an hour and a half, an hour and 50 minutes, so there's going to be an awful lot of viewing.
So RJ, by famine, does he mean like all the cultures globally were experiencing a famine at the time?
Yeah. And somehow or other, they would have been all coming to Egypt for food because that's the only granary that was available, remember,
because the pyramids are granary.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if they get onto that aspect of it, but and it's really odd that we don't find rice and corn being mentioned in the Bible, though. Odd, isn't it?
No, it's RJ. You're just not believing hard enough.
Yes. I'm not thinking biblically enough, or I'm.
You got to put on your Bible glasses.
Yeah. Anyway, put on those little there like that. Anyway, meanwhile, on to Jeanson's actual book. And this is still in that long segment where he's offering a reprise of already known stuff. And he actually veers perilously close to some new information that I thought was kind of funky. He mentioned cyclin genes, where there are apparently several of them. And unfortunately, the papers are open access, so I was able to put the links up into them. And they're on these genes. There's at least three main ones, and you can knock out any one of them, and apparently in mice it didn't seem to make a problem. And yet, if you knock out all three, you got a dead mouse. Well, it turns out there's a bit more than even he was discussing. For one thing, I was fascinated that he put the oldest paper last, the one that discussed that they were all, that you had to eliminate all three of the genes. So this was suggesting that they're just a synergistic element. Well, it turns out that if you eliminate just two of the genes, bad things can happen in that as well, because it turns out pancreatic development as an adult is thrown off. Now, what this is instantly screaming for an evolutionist is you're seeing a gene and it gets duplicated and modified and duplicated and modified, and the newer versions of the gene start taking on novel roles in the developing organism that the original gene didn't do on its own.
That sounds like evolution or something.
Yeah. Meanwhile, what exactly is his explanation for this? And he doesn't offer any.
They already had them, RJ.
He just offers it as a dangling detail. And so I'll be curious to see whether anywhere down the road, in dealing with mice or anything that uses cyclin genes, or mice or men, yes, whether or not he actually gets into all of that. So I put in another paper. He had this one from Kozar and Carthon from 2004 and 2005. But Kushner's paper, which on the D2 and D1 are needed for postnatal pancreatic growth, somehow he managed to miss that one. And they're from the same science teams. There's an awful lot of overlap on there. So clearly this was other work that was being done at the same time. And somehow he manages, as usual, to miss it. Then he got on to a bit about, more about knockout genes. So there's a 2013 review from White that's really quite detailed. Technically, it doesn't mention evolution issues in it, which is probably why he was happy to do it. But you always have to wonder why particular technical papers are brought up. And unless he reads them really carefully, it's probable that he's kind of parsing through to make sure that if he is citing material, it stays kind of away from evolution issues, so that if some of his readers decide to follow up on it, they won't be tainted by the nasty E word that would be embedded down in the discussion of the thing.
Evidence.
But in typical, if you start looking beyond that, if you bring up cyclin genes or anything else, and you start researching the bigger context, you discover, no, it's knee deep in evolution. So you're going to find about it one way or another. And then there's the oldest of the papers in here is this Winsler one on yeast from 1999. That again,
the
all
yeast of our problems.
Yeah, the yeast of our problems. Did you get the pun bugged while you were out at the grocery?
Maybe I'm just tired. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that can do it because it's all been a wacky time on here. But anyway, all of those are still waiting for the thing that I'm not sure that's ever going to happen, and that is he really starts connecting data field up to his arguments. Because I know that in the charts that's going to be coming in way later chapters where he makes these bald assertions about animals materializing post-flood, he doesn't offer source citations for it, as far as I can see. It's all based on his treatment of his own database things that he's kind of assembled. And I'm hoping between this part and down there that there's some foundation laid for that we can be able to fact check out. But I'm not entirely sure about that. And at least this is pre-Joseph's Greenery issue. That only popped up in his 2018 paper that he did on creationism, that he first suggested that. So this apparently, the Joseph bit is kind of a new bit that's knocking around in his head, and we'll find out whether or not he does anything significant about it at a later point. And we see our own, since we're about halfway through the show, let me thank patrons. We got the delight that there, in spite of all of the troubles that are going around, there are still patrons for the program. And I am very, very thankful of all of that. And so I would like to thank again Hendril and Eric and Ben and Speed of Sound and Cyrus and Zeshi, who are our colleague level, our research level, Travis Adams, the ubiquitous Ian Chen, Convert Me and Eat Meal, and James and History Minor, and Ralph and Paul Gia, and assistant researchers Doranku and Totus Real, and then our friends Daniel and Steve and Marigale, Insects Cool, Devin, Morton, Paul the Skeptics, Puffalophagus, Bo, Alex, Paul, and then legacy patrons who I will always thank anyway: Jen, Jody, Mike, John, Keith, Andrew, Dyer, Yui, Mona, Brad, Daniel, Nyanya, Staggle, Sun Sky Stones, Ugly German Truth, Everett, and Sewer. Every one of you that has been able to help in any way, shape, or form, it's been important to what I've been doing, and it makes me feel proud that there are people out there who are actually willing to shell out a couple bucks a month to keep the old RJ moving. So there we got that shameless plug operation done on Rocks Volume 1, and then we can bring up the part 2 of the show, which we don't necessarily go into a lot of political stuff, but this was just too juicy to mix up. And that had to do with the role of hysteria surrounding Antifa and how a whole bunch of wackaloons just believe in absolute claptrap. And since this is a methods issue that we'll want to be referring to in subsequent books, because it relates to how Tortucan minds relate. Anyway, there's a linkage that you can get that I put up to a bunch of stuff at NBC News that was being done by Brandy Zadrozny and colleagues. They're just astonishing rumors. For example, in Klamath Falls, of which 90% of their voters apparently voted for Trump, they were rallied against a non-existent busload of Antifa they thought were about to descend on them. And that reminded me of the old classic Twilight Zone episode, The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, where aliens evoke paranoid fighting among a neighborhood just by flipping the power on and off selectively. I put a linkage up to that because you would need to see it as well. It's a season 1, episode 22, aired in 1960, 60 damn years ago.
RJ?
I think that was like 3 Jacksons ago.
Yeah, indeed.
RJ?
Yeah.
That situation sounds a lot like the aliens deciding to mess with people because, oh, gee, let's see how pissed off we can get them. Let's see how pissed off at their power.
Oh, well, when I'm going to invade an alien planet, the first thing I'm going to do is to pick some illiterate fishermen to kidnap and experiment on, and then release them and have them tell tall tale shit stories. I mean, that was the joke in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where the alien Ford prefect was saying that some of their bunch like to go down onto planets that no one's visited before and make beep beep noises at them just to scare the shit out of them, and then it goes, it's kind of silly, isn't it? But anyway, this Klamath Falls case was just absolutely weird because there was no bus, there was no Antifa, but they were running around and they were getting their guns out and they were really prepared for the incoming thing that had just materialized out of the ether. White nationalists have been exploiting the Antifa myths. We've got Donald Trump's pathetic attempt to link the old guy that was pushed to the ground in Buffalo. Remember that video from a bit ago, to Antifa. All of this shows how that bad method and that tendency towards demonization and rumor mill goes on. I was just in a little bit yesterday involving Rudy Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani put up a link to somebody who was saying that Ilhan Omar studied with terrorists in Somalia, and they put up a picture to prove it. But it wasn't of her. They tracked, their experts tracked it back to a posting that was put up in 1978.
Ooh.
4 years before she was born.
Well, isn't that a neat trick?
Yeah, yeah, the time-traveling Ilhan Omar.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe we should give her the nomination just for being a time traveler.
Yeah, what was clear about this is that Rudy Giuliani could not possibly have even taken the trouble of Google searching the damned issue. Otherwise, he would have found out a whole bunch of fact checkers. The one from PolitiFact had fact checked it last year because it had been circulating in the rumor mill for quite some time. And
RJ, PolitiFact is a liberal propaganda website.
So U.S. News and all these other ones, they immediately dismissed. That's the other bit. I think I can't remember whether I put a link up to it or not, but John Oliver, I know I did on Twitter. John Oliver just a couple days ago did a brilliant discussion of how do you detect stupid conspiracy theory.
Oh, I haven't watched that one yet.
Yeah, and it's extremely good. It talks about that. How big of a conspiracy do you need in order for this to happen? What are the odds that everybody has not noticed this? That only the tiny little niche person that you're listening to has managed to spot this grand conspiracy? Is there a more? Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Just making sure because I had lost some connections earlier.
Okay, well that does happen. Anyway, you keep an eye on the live feed in there.
Oh
Slade,
shit, I don't have that.
Oh, Slade Chimera says my brother has been watching those old episodes. He's in lockdown and has them on DVD. If you want to have your mind deliciously warped, watch Twilight Zone. It is a series that wears extremely well, even though they were made half a century ago, 60 years ago. They're sophisticated, they're intelligent, they're thought-provoking. They could just as easily have been made last year as today, because Rod Serling was a sharp, brilliant writer. Earl Hamner, the guy that created the Waltons, was one of the writers on the show. His name pops up every once in a while on the scripts. It has wonderful music, including by Bernard Herrmann, the guy that scored not only Twilight Zone, but Alfred Hitchcock movies and fantasy motion pictures and all of that stuff. Exactly. And so it's got stuff. I'm one of those who watched Twilight Zone when it was live, back when the show was on in the 50s and 60s. And so I still love to play the how long does it take me to remember the plot just from like the first opening segments of it. So you're like you're looking at a couple seconds of the scene and go, oh, that's the episode where
right.
And if you can get to that stage, but I don't think you'll find any Twilight Zone episode. If you need to binge watch something during the COVID times, you could certainly do worse than that, because it's affected. I got more philosophy out of Twilight Zone than any religious document could ever manage. You learn that you can't assume that aliens are bad just because they're aliens, but sometimes it's a cookbook. And the idea of decency and rationality, and it dealt with the Holocaust and anti-Semitism and racial discrimination in all varying layers. It had a hell of a lot of performers that you will probably recognize in their early careers, or people that were kind of in their late end of the career that did stuff on Twilight Zone because they could kind of get into a new area. So that, and other than just one season, they're all half hour. So they're relatively short, especially without commercials. They're only like about 20 minutes long. So you can easily zip through quite a lot of them that way. And it's an instant window to a lost world. This is the era of late Eisenhower, early John F. Kennedy, and into the early Jeanson years. And it's a time when there were telephone booths, and there were giant automobiles that had bad gas mileage, and social discrimination issues.
RJ, I remember one of the episodes that made me very anxious was the one with it's like 3 airmen, and during their mission they find a spaceship and they bring it back and they disappear one by one.
Oh yeah.
That gave me so much anxiety.
There are episodes in there that are memorably creepy. Some of which were redone when they made the movie Twilight Zone, the movie in the 1980s. And then of course there was there's a new series out now, which I haven't, it's streaming on the services I can't afford. But nevertheless, I'm sure from what I've seen of it, they're probably just as sophisticated with modern special effects. You won't, if you're waiting for elaborate special effects in the original Twilight Zone, forget it. They would be another thing I love looking for in Twilight Zone are pieces of Forbidden Planet, because where they were filming it with the MGM's backlot, they would have pieces of the Forbidden Planet spaceship, the landing thing that pops down, the bubbles and the interior details and uniforms and things. They would be recycled in these various shows because they were at that time the movie had only been made a few years earlier, 1956, and it's a couple years old. So they were making use out of all of this, just like Robbie the Robot would pop up as a kind of a guest shot on a lot of shows, including a Twilight Zone episode at one point. And so you can look at it not only for its content and its intellectual interest, but also as a window on a world that doesn't exist anymore, that for me was very real because I was growing up in it. And if you think like 1980 seems a long time ago, wait till you try to wrap your brain around the 1960s.
Or RJ, the one where Earth had like spun out of its orbit and it was getting closer to the sun.
Yeah.
And so they had the woman, it was following the woman as like the Earth's getting hotter.
Yeah.
But she wakes up and she has a fever only to realize the Earth is spinning away from the sun.
Yes,
I was like,
yes.
oh
So
my goodness.
Yeah. There's a long tradition. Damon Runyon and others had the tradition of the twist ending. And sometimes these were humorous stories and other times they were serious ones. Well, the twist ending kicker is a classic of Twilight Zone structure, of where you find the end that like it's a cookbook, one of the famous end taglines, or the guy that the little fellow Burgess Meredith, who was the dweeby little librarian that was stuck.
Oh, there was time now. There
in
was
a bank
time.
vault, and everyone's destroyed in a nuclear war, and then he breaks his glasses accidentally.
Yeah, he's like, there was time now. Yeah.
They had some of the best actors on television in one form or another in there, and one of the episodes you can even see really early Robert Redford. He plays an angel that's taking a little old lady that was afraid to die, so she was barricading herself in her house and she won't let anybody in, and the nice pleasant young man is actually the angel that's trying to take her across the line. Oh yeah, it's I cannot recommend Twilight Zone more highly. It's
also it's a cookbook.
It's a cookbook. Yeah, that one. That's also, you can see that episode, that the ramp that the guy's being dragged up. That's the one from the Forbidden Planet spaceship. So that pops up there again. And it's fun to look at who is writing the script for them, how many of them are written by Rod Serling versus other people, and the various directors involved. It's an interesting window to an ancient time that relates to why we are the way we are in the decades after that. And it helps you understand a bit more about history. Plus, they're ripping good stories. So there we go. RJ's gone all off the deep end on the Twilight Zone. And while we're at it, check out Outer Limits, which was not as good as the Twilight Zone, but still memorable stuff. Those were all hour-long shows, and it was only on for 2 seasons, so there's not a huge number of those. And they did a remake of that, I think, in the late 90s or early 2000s that were, again, not bad episodes. But it's the anthology series approach to science fiction. Unlike Star Trek, which, of course, was a continuing cast storyline. And when Star Trek came out, that was a new thing. There hadn't been a continuing cast storyline science fiction since the Buck Rogers crap and stuff that was in the early 1950s that were really sleazy little kid shows. And so all of the serious science fiction that was being done in the early days of TV and then on Twilight Zone and Outer Limits were anthology ones where there were no carryover characters. It was one episode completely independent. So they were basically short story subplots. And there's an awful lot that's very vivid and ingenious and neat music in the Outer Limits as well. And a whole bunch, the episodes with William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy and Martin Landau and Robert Duvall. There's a whole bunch of people that had gigantic careers in so many different areas that you're just seeing little snippets of them popping up as miscellaneous characters in Outer Limits episodes in that period from 64 to 65. In fact, that was just before Star Trek was being made. And it was in that period that the director, this is total geek out moment, the producer of the Outer Limits series was a believer in Esperanto, the artificial language that he wanted to have everyone speak. So he actually talked William Shatner to do a horror film all in Esperanto. And every once in a while it's shown on television. It's absolutely a peculiar thing to watch. This witches in this town. It was all in black and white. It was horribly artsy. It was done, I think the music was done by Stefano, who was the guy who did the music for Outer Limits. And it was not Stefano. I can't think of his name right off the bat. Anyway, it's a film that if you ever have a chance to catch it, I think they show it once in a while, either on Fox or the Turner Classic Movies. Watch it once because it's just ghastly, pretentious. Anyway, that's the outer structure. Needless to say, Esperanto did not catch on as a universal language. It's kind of a mishmash of Italian, French, and English, and it's sounds vaguely Italian-y-ish if you actually listen to it. Yeah, but imagine, the entire, I think it's the only film that was ever done in Esperanto. Not even the advocates of Esperanto tried to do anything in Esperanto other than this. So anyway, so did you catch any questions on the coming in? Lisa for Truth says Star Wars is better than Star Trek. I don't.
Yes, Lisa for Truth. That's why they call you that.
I would like to monitor the live chat if I had a link to it.
Oh, yes. Let me put that in the thingy here. Terribly sorry. Let's see if we can get a
old fart
there. Woo! So if everybody is as we are, you can probably tell the fact that RJ's brain is melting from the heat here, and so that's why.
Oh, this heat's nothing.
Yeah, well, I don't. At least I don't have the humidity.
Fair enough, I guess.
90 would. Does it often get into the 90s down there in Louisiana? Holy shit!
Oh, we had like a couple times it was in the 90s, and I think even 100.
Yipes. Boy, you just kind of want to be put in an ice chest or something under those conditions, right?
Yeah, I try just to stay in the house or at work. Yeah. So there's that.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The air conditioning is much more frequent. That's another thing that indicates the old fartism of RJ, is that air conditioning is way less common in my upbringing. That I was already on the planet like, yipes, 19. I was in my 20s before we ever had a car that had air conditioning in it. So if you can just imagine driving on a long trip, my mother doing all the driving, she would take our family back in the 1950s in the 56 Plymouth that had no air conditioning.
Okay, Slate Chimera, I have to say the better franchise is Stargate.
No. I can't go with that.
No, sorry.
Oh, yeah. This is one that's fighting words. Now, I love both of them. In fact, finally, I think it's either TNT or TBS that's showing Solo this weekend. I've been wanting to see that. That's the one that didn't do very well. And
I thought it was cute. It was cute.
It gets 3 stars. I'm curious to see, because when things don't do well, it's either because somebody was expecting a different movie than what they got, or it really is bad. And sometimes bad movies are really bad, but a lot of them, I was delighted and surprised at how much I like John Carter, which was a colossal fiasco.
It was, that was all right. It was interesting.
Yeah. And
although I have to say, all 3 of the Star Wars movies, of the main ones in the series, I thought the newest ones were not good. The first one was just a rehash of A New Hope. The second one was nonsensical. The third one just wasn't good.
I liked all of the. I thought they tidied up the loose ends as best as they could.
I liked the performance by. I mean, I thought all the actors I think are fine actors.
Oh yeah.
I just think they got dealt a bad script. And so
there are way worse scripts. If you want to see examples of, I measure things on a pecking order. Have you ever seen Zardoz?
No.
That's Sean Connery in John Boorman's epic science fiction story about a dystopian future where there's this giant flying head that floats around and drops guns down for the human beings that are left over to shoot each other, and then it flies back to a bunch of enclave immortals that are trapped because of the computer that they built. And it's a terrible, pretentious, overly long movie that at best was a half-hour Twilight Zone script, ran way out too far. But yeah, take a look at that. That would be an example. Another one, Quartet by Robert Altman. Oh my God, people who don't do science fiction should avoid doing science fictions. Saturn 3 that was done by Stanley Donen and Kirk Douglas. I think is only the other science fiction they ever did was 20,000 Leagues. And they're trying to enter the storyline without a really love and affection for it. Now I'll put on the other scale what I would consider a masterpiece science fiction is something like Quatermass in the Pit from 1968. It's half the length of a typical Star Wars movie, and it is a Swiss watch plot of such perfection and economy and elegance and wit. Everybody that's ever a screenwriter bows as unworthy when you look at how Nigel Neal put a script together. And although I admire Abrams, he does nice scripts. They're clever. They've got a lot of things, and I think I like him more than you do. But he's a peripheral compared to somebody like that. Or in non-science fiction contexts, Robert Bolt, who did so much stuff for David Lean, Lawrence of Arabia, and
the only one of the new Star Wars movies that I really liked was Rogue One. I thought Rogue One was fantastic.
I agree. Rogue One was very good.
That one knocked me over.
In fact, I think in part because they had the audacity to not try for a happy ending. This is actually a terrible tragedy. Spoiler alert.
It's been out for like 5 years by now. So.
Yeah. And so you're expecting that there's going to be a nice resolution and a bit of happy ending, and no, there's not. There's just
well, sort of. There's kind of a happy.
Well, for the other people, but not for them. So they
get the knowledge that they won ultimately.
Yeah, and it was beautifully paced. It had a good script, good action. It was an ingenious prequel storyline that fit in, that made sense within the context. I have the classification of a PLM, a pleasant little movie, a film that I'm not bored by watching it, that I kind of care a bit about the characters and I kind of want to find out how it's going to end. After it's done, I may not go, well, my life has changed. No, it was just a PLM. There's nothing wrong with it. And so I found that all of the Star Wars movies were okay. I think the 3 prequels that Lucas did suffered from the fact that he had an unlimited budget and nobody to tell him no. And
Revenge of the Sith is my favorite Star Wars movie.
Oh,
or
really?
Of the series.
Of the prequels?
Yeah.
Well, it was the darkest of them, yeah.
I loved it. Again, that's another one where again, the good guys lost. Ultimately.
Yeah. They're not terrible movies. They've got some difficulties with them. The thing that I have a bone to pick with him on is that there's an element of incomplete pretension about him. Lucas likes to think that he has this is sort of an analogy of the rise of tyrannies and the fall of the German Republic and the fall of the Roman Republic and all of that. But he doesn't earn that because he's got basically a cliche of villainous characters that do their villainy in ingenious oblivion to everything. That how do you build a gigantic army without anybody knowing about it? How do you do these things without anybody? Well, they need a free press, damn it. That's the problem.
They had faked being one of the good guys, and they had gone on behalf of them and said, oh, hey, they'll give you the check whenever you crank this thing out. And they'd also erased it from the archive so that it wouldn't be there. And
well, yeah, he comes up with a lot of arguments about, but when we look at real, because I know about the Weimar.
This isn't real, RJ. This is sci-fi.
I know it's only a movie, but you realize that all of this was. It was only. It was okay.
Attack of the Clones was okay. I loved Revenge of the Sith. I thought it was great.
It built up. Remember, it has to get to the point where you have a feeling you understand why Darth Vader is doing what he's doing in the first film of the original motion picture. So they had an end point that they had to get to, and part of the difficulty was that Lucas went through a bit more circumlocution to get there in the 3 movies than he probably needed to if he'd had a script editor.
I honestly think I think the character that he develops is like, he's a troubled character, or Anakin is a troubled character, right? But you go from he's sort of a troubled character to he's just flat evil. And I think and one of the things I like about the Clone Wars TV show is you see more of the progression, because it's a whole TV show where you see this progression from being a troubled character towards this is someone I could believe would actually do these things.
And there's the difference is why whereas I admire James Cameron for his script construction, and I admire J.J. Abrams for his script construction, I'm not a great admirer of George Lucas's script construction. That he's there.
James Cameron was he the Avatar guy?
Yeah, and Titanic.
He just ripped off everything. Avatar was Fern Gully, but with aliens.
Buckaroo, there haven't been any original scripts since the Greeks.
Okay, so, I mean, okay. I had watched a video recently, or Camilla showed me a video recently where it was comparing like all the different movies that were like, this is Avatar.
Yeah. Lisa for Truth has been monetized. Yay, Lisa. Da, da, da.
Oh, by the way, no, it's not Fern Gully with aliens.
Yes, it is.
Fern Gully in space.
Forbidden Planet is ripping off The Tempest from Shakespeare, And so you got all of these kinds of storylines that fall on it. Genuinely original scripts or genuinely original constructions aren't that easy to do. And that's why I, as a writer, am very focused on things that I've never seen anything like this before. And it's not just because you have a gigantic special effects budget or something like that. Quatermass in the Pit doesn't have a gigantic special effects budget. In fact, some of the special effects are barely, because it was pushing the envelope for Hammer movies, but nothing to sneeze at. A Doctor Who TV series has more spectacular stuff today, but you're never going to outdo the script on that. I'm very fond of the Andromeda Strain, the 1971 from Robert Wise. I enjoy that a lot. Things to Come, the H.G. Wells science fiction, because they're thought-provoking, and that connects up also that the thing about Twilight Zone was that it was always thought-provoking. It was always about something. It would be entertaining. There would be good writing and good acting, powerful performances of things. A lot of people that you wouldn't have known for doing dramatic parts were doing dramatic things in Twilight Zone. Mickey Rooney has a riveting single episode where he's this envious jockey who wants to be, because Mickey Rooney's quite a small guy, wants to be a big man, and he sort of magical thing happens and he's a big man. He's now a larger person so much that he can't get out of the room, and he's trapped in this thing. It's a terrible irony. He got his wish. He's a big man now.
Hey, I just got a question.
Yeah.
Is Mickey Rooney the little brother of Mickey Mantle?
No. And as you can tell from the fact that they don't share the last names.
I was trying to be funny.
Well, one of these days you're going to succeed, Tornado. Mickey Rooney.
Spy upon you.
Mickey Rooney, otherwise, well, here's connections. I think Mickey Mantle and, no, I don't think Mickey Mantle was the one that married Monroe. It was a different baseball player. But Mickey Rooney was, at one point, a gigantically successful movie star. Back in the times of the 1930s with Judy Garland, just a bit after Judy Garland made The Wizard of Oz. And they made a whole bunch of these, let's put on a show things, musicals in the 30s and early 40s. Mickey Rooney then kind of bounced along, had 5 or 6 marriages. He was always marrying beautiful women taller than he was, which was difficult not to do because he was short. And he had a prickly personality, and he pops up. If you want, here's a litmus test movie that you'll either love it or hate it. Mickey Rooney has a big part in Stanley Kramer's gigantic epic comedy, It's a Mad, 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 Mad World from 1963. And if you can see the long version, instead of the short 2-hour, 45-minute release version, watch the original cut 3-hour, 15-minute version. That's available. Yeah, it's a gigantic thing. And believe me, you'll either love it or you'll go, this is a comedy. There will be no middle point on it. I've had people that try to watch Mad Mad World and go, it's all about, it's almost real time, especially in the 3-hour, 15-minute version, where a guy who was served a sentence for robbing a place and he buried the money. And he's racing to get back to it. This happens right in the beginning of the movie, and he crashes his car. And all the people who come down to rescue him, he tells the secret of where the money is. It's under a big W down at Santa Rosita Park. And all of the people that are down there, including Mickey Rooney, all chase after to get there ahead of everybody else, while the police are chasing after them. And there are just some unbelievable stunts with aircraft.
There was like an Animaniacs movie where they were all going to find the meteor because they would get one wish. And so like everyone in the town is going to find.
They may, knowing how hip the Animaniacs was, I wouldn't be at all surprised if there were some allusions to it.
Wait, I've seen that one.
Yeah, it's like they tell, because they see it, and I think they tell the townspeople you get one wish, and so they go off, and then all the townspeople also go off to find it. And so yeah, and so this thing is they're racing along. It's got Ethel Merman, who plays the mother-in-law from hell,
who is the most annoying person you will ever see on film. If you want to kill her at every moment, and everything she says
Ben
as
Shapiro.
advice is excellent. It's wonderful advice, but you can't stand her. And Spencer Tracy, who did a whole bunch of serious. This, by the way, the whole movie was done on a dare. That
like Scientology.
Almost, well, not quite that. But Stanley Kramer was a message filmmaker, and so On the Beach, which was an anti-war movie, and Inherit the Wind, which anybody that's has heard about all of the Scopes trial and all that classic movie. These had all. Spencer Tracy was in these motion pictures, and he was very much a message film. And
wait, the Scopes monkey trial?
Yeah, Inherit the Wind. If you haven't seen Inherit the Wind with Spencer
movie.
Tracy and that, you must see it. It's superb.
I liked it.
It's a somewhat fictionalized account because it's from a stage play, but still gets the main points across. And it's a magnificent motion picture. It's superb. Anyway, that was made in 1960. On the Beach, which is the feel-good end of the world movie, anti-war from 1959. And he did Judgment in Nuremberg on the Holocaust trials. And Ship of Fools that's set in the Nazi period. I mean, these are all serious, heavyweight movies. These are not laugh fests as films. And so here, Kramer went to a meeting, a party of a bunch of critics in New York, and they all adored him. And they said, it's a pity you could never do a comedy. And he said, oh. So on a dare, he did It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. And it's the only big film he ever did in color. It's in super duper widescreen, super Panavision. It's just an astonishing. Jonathan Winters delivers one of his great performances in there. He was a tough one to do films with. He was like a fireworks display to try to pin down. Sid Caesar, who was before the kind of eclipse that went for years before he was then picked up in the movies of Mel Brooks and got kind of a second wind in his career in the 1970s. Oh God, almost every comedian under the sun is in the thing. And it's an epic comedy, and it's a masterful script. It's got an incredibly riveting score, hilarious music, this kind of merry-go-round motif and stuff by the court composer that worked for Stanley Kramer. So anyway, that's everything that needs to go. So if you can find a copy of, especially the long version, I know it's out on Blu-ray in the long edition, or the short 2-hour, 45-minute one if you're pinched for time. Take a look at it, and you'll either love it or you'll hate it. Backus, Jim Backus, who is well known as Thurston Howell III. From the old, Gilligan's Island. Before that, he was creating that character in this movie. He's this pompous rich guy with an airplane that they need to get. Mickey Rooney has to borrow the plane because they can fly down to Santa Rosita in this twin-engine Beechcraft. And this character here likes to drink while he's flying, and so he completely gets snockered and gets knocked out. So poor Mickey Rooney and his sidekick are trying to fly the plane on their own in this two-engine Beechcraft. And it's got some of the most amazing, that would now be illegal stunt work, of flying a twin-engine Beechcraft for real through an airplane hangar. This is not a special effect, it's a live shot. When they tried to do a thing like that in one of the James Bond movies, they did it with a smaller plane that they put on an armature and ran on a Jeep through there. They didn't even try to actually physically fly a plane through an airplane hangar the way they did in Mad, Mad, Mad World. And then there's a scene where the plane is coming up to a restaurant full of people, and it's on a cable to prevent it, but it comes through and the propellers smash the glass in the window. And it's like... You could never do that legally today, because if that cable had broken, you would have killed 20 or 30 people instantly.
You know what that reminds me of, RJ? That reminds me of Airplane, when the guy's like, they're coming right at us.
They're coming right at us, yeah. Oh, that's another, well, I'll go a little bit longer. This is because I blame it on the heat. All of the heat is causing me to not talk about Jeanson and evolution and anything else in there. If you can have a chance to see Zero Hour, which is the movie that they were parodying in Airplane, to compare the two versions. And I have a weird third layer to that because I've seen the original TV film that was made in Canada that was then later made into the movie version, 0 Hour, that was then later parodied by Airplane. And who of all people played the main lead in the Canadian version was DeForest Kelley from Star Trek. And when I saw that, I go, whoa. A 0 Hour, Alex Haley, I think, was the one. I think he was the guy that did Roots later, had written the storyline. And God, I can't think of the old actor. He was a bit of an alcoholic that played in the film version of 0 Hour. But they didn't have to make up a hell of a lot of the plot. They just gussied it up with all of the jokes and the side bits and that. The Airplane 2, that's not terribly funny. That one's kind of a yawner, although it's not terrible. And then the Hot Shots series with Charlie Sheen, where they did all the kind of, they were riffing off of Top Gun. And
I don't understand that. I don't understand why, like, people talk about Top Gun as though it's some magnificent film. It's okay. It's fine. I watched it. It's all right, but I don't get it.
It was an okay film.
Yeah, it was all right.
It was immensely popular. Val Kilmer has not really had that great of a career after that as well. And they've apparently done a really elaborate sequel film with some really impressive flight shots.
In terms of historically, it just didn't make any sense. But also in terms of like movies with young Tom Cruise, I liked A Few Good Men more. I thought that one was better.
I can unfortunately never watch any Tom Cruise movie without me flashing footnotes, Scientologist.
Nah,
he's a perfectly fine actor, but you know, there's always that little weird quality to it.
He was on the Graham Norton show, and he was there with Emily Blunt and someone else, and Seth MacFarlane. And I was is Tom Cruise aware of how much Seth MacFarlane has made fun of him on Family Guy?
I don't know. It'd be fun to find out.
Yeah.
The also thing is, isn't he kind of short?
Seth MacFarlane, I think so.
No, not.
Oh,
Seth
Tom Cruise. Yeah,
Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise
short.
is not, which is true of an awful lot of performers. There were quite a few. One who's way too much beyond Alan Ladd, who was so short that he would have to stand on a box when he was.
Are we off the air? No, I think we're still on.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, but it was like there was an episode where like Tom Cruise met Stewie the baby, and Tom Cruise is the same height as Stewie, you know. And
oh dear, that is vicious. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, while we're rambling on in free association mode here, if you haven't seen Seth MacFarlane's science fiction series, The Orville, that's actually damn good. It was remarkably clever scripts. It got a lot of dramatic element to this. They've got good cast. They've got it started out kind of bumpy in the first couple of episodes, but it's really damn good.
Oh, I saw one episode of it and I kind of liked it. So
yeah, it's simultaneously doing homages to Star Trek, and it shows you how things have advanced. I mean, my God, the original Star Trek production team would have sold their grandmother to have special effects that of the level that they can do effortlessly for a comic science fiction series.
I'm gonna head off. No.
Okay, Tornado. Don't accept any wooden penguins.
Okay. No.
Bye, Tornado.
Bye, Tornado. Well, I think we're past our thing. Did we waste an hour?
Yes.
Yes, we did. It's hot. I only put the shirt on just like a few minutes before getting the camera on. I've been wandering around bare-chested, and I thought that is an image that I never want anyone to see. So
I think Scientist Mel would like to see that.
Oh no, Scientist Mel would not want to see that.
Mel goes, "Excuse me."
It's topless RJ. That might bring some more viewers, man. Maybe not the viewers you want,
or could
but,
put people off their feed for several months.
There is a market for everything, RJ.
Oh boy, if there's a market for that, not only do I need to exploit it, but it could mean the end of civilization as we know it.
Anyway, I'm gonna take off now with that.
Yeah. Anyway,
I leave you guys with a with images of a bare-chested RJ and enjoying.
But anyway, the upshots about this is that bad method that we see in the Jeansons of the world and the creationists show up in the weird conspiracy thinking about Antifa and the failure to source fact check, to rely on secondary sources without looking into any of the material. It's the same bad method all the way up and down. And so once you get into the, oh, is that true? How do you check it out? So all of the stuff I've been blithering on about, and Jackson and I have been talking about Star Wars and Star Trek and Twilight Zone and all these other things. Theoretically, you can follow up on it yourself. You can look into it. And even on a matter of that, then when we get into the aesthetics of it, Star Wars versus Star Trek, now we are no longer in the realm of empirical observation. Now we're into the realm of philosophy and personal preference and interest and all of that, to where it's not good or bad, whether you think Star Trek is better than Star Wars or vice versa. It's that you enjoy watching one more than the other, although you can still empirically observe defects or problems. I'll tell you this with Star Wars, before as an endpoint. Star Wars is way better than it would have been had he had enough money. If he had $30 million to film Star Wars, it would have been like the prequels, that he would have gone way off the rails. And I think one of the things that made it so good is that he was forced to economize and be tight and ingenious in how he played around with his $9 million budget, which was small. I mean, 2001: A Space Odyssey cost $12 million. So it was a relatively low budget film, and he got a lot of bang out of the buck on it. I think they spent $30 million on the next film, something like that. And I think it was like in the 150 or $200 million range for the prequels, but by then he had umpteen zillions dollars, and they needed
the George Lucas by then. So
yeah, exactly. And that was part of the problem, is that one of the tricks with a really clever director is the ability to step back from yourself and to see where you need to correct things. And that's one of the things that gets into, if you have a partnership between a producer director, where there's somebody looking over your shoulder that can say, yeah, are you sure about that? Whereas the auteur director, who is running all of the show, can often run out of control on that. And this has happened in a lot of areas. David O. Selznick, who made Gone with the Wind, began to take himself way too seriously. And he was, in effect, a producer director who would micromanage things from his end, and he could get out of control on that. Alfred Hitchcock, to some extent, had that kind of feature. So it's a mingling bag. The Mad World guy, Stanley Kramer, his entire great film career, of the ones that you want to watch, were made over like a 5-year period. He was a fast burnout sort. So somebody that's actually had a long STEM career that's produced something, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Star Trek and Star Wars wins on becoming invigorated in the entire culture, to where people know Star Wars at a level that Star Trek, it will probably never reach, even though it's had a bunch of TV series and all that kinds of stuff. There's a thing that Star Wars resonates with the whole global culture in a way that's absolutely unique, and that's a positive thing about it. You instantly know what the hell I'm doing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Scientist Mel, pull this plug before we go on even longer. See you all next week. Everybody stay safe because of COVID. Check out some of the stuff. Watch Twilight Zone. You will not go wrong watching any Twilight Zone episode. I guarantee it.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
And all of the music that Mel picks forces me into the 1960s. I'm suddenly in an episode of The Man from U.N.C.L.E., when they would be visiting some party where they would be playing rock music. And there would always be squeaky clean well-groomed hippies. Wandering around in this stuff. It was always a strangely surreal world, and that music just instantly pops up in my head because that's the kind of stuff they would. Way before your time. I don't know. Have you ever even seen any Man from